Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. In today's video, we are doing the April predictions, aka the April horoscopes for your zodiac sign. And so April is just such a key and pivotal month for the collective at large and for us on an individual basis. Obviously, there's a lot going on right now in the world, and April is going to be a huge shift. And so we've been feeling that shift currently and approaching Aries season, this Aries new moon. It's such a huge burst of energy. And the Aries new moon is really going to signify a huge new start for a lot of us. I did do a Aries new moon predictions video for your zodiac sign, so you guys can go watch that. But this huge energy, or this huge amount of energy that this Aries new moon is bringing, is really going to initiate something very new in our lives. And in this video, I'm really going to divulge and describe how that relates to you, what new changes are happening in your zodiac sign, and how that will just affect your life based on your zodiac sign. And so with that being said, this video is based on your rising sign. Now you guys can watch it for your sun and moon sign, or all three of those, just to see which is most accurate, but I did base this off of your rising sign. Okay, let's just get into it. If you're watching this, make sure you comment down below. Comment down below and tell me the emoji of your rising sign. Okay, so let's talk about the month of April for Pisces. Okay, Pisces, so the month of April is such a pivotal month for everyone, and specifically I'm going to explain what that means in your life. April is really this sense of a new beginning. Of course, it is Aries season, so it's like literally a new beginning astrologically. But in April, the major theme really is the sense of being skillful, using what you have to get what you want, and doing it in a crafty way or a skillful way. And so this very crafty and very skillful energy is going to be needed because there's going to be a lot of opportunities for a lot of people, especially for you Pisces, and I'll explain why. But there's this element of opportunity present. Although there is a lot of chaos in the world right now, there's a lot of opportunity within chaos, and April is really going to reward people who know how to skillfully seek out that opportunity and capitalize on it. So for you Pisces, in April, I titled your prediction the month of opportunity. But needless to say, there are a lot of opportunities coming at you in April, and I'll explain some of them in a second. But with Pisces, sun, moon, and rising, what you're really dealing with here in April is learning how to control yourself, control your finances. With the sun being in your second house for the beginning part of April, and then the third house for the second part of April, there's this sense of really gaining a foundation, setting the groundwork for success in your life. And of course, the way you create a foundation is by having self-control, having control of your finances. And the second house really represents finances, of course. And for you, I think that's a huge focus for you in April. And it's more than just money. I feel like you're kind of restructuring how you do things in your life. Is it productive to your goals? And I feel like with Pisces energy, obviously it can struggle with like boundaries. It can struggle with kind of the sense of consistency. And I feel like with the sun being in the second house, it's going to be so beneficial for you because it's going to give you that grounded sense of work ethic, that very stable sense of approaching things. So this benefits you because it makes you able to kind of look at your finances in a logical way, in a grounded way, and kind of structure them in a more productive way. And I really feel like with this energy, it's like you're planting the seeds for something. That's the biggest theme I also see for Pisces, is like this theme and like this vision of planting seeds. Second house is this energy of setting the foundation, like I said, and I feel like you're setting a lot of seeds in place for success later down the line. And I feel like you're really feeling this Aries energy so strongly, and it's going to be such a great new start for you because you're setting yourself up for success for the long term. And to touch on the opportunities happening in your life in April, basically, as I mentioned, the sun is going to be mostly in your second house during April, and then it's going to go to your third house. So how I see this manifesting for you is that, of course, you're setting this foundation, right? You're setting these seeds in place, planting seeds, etc. And then sort of in the middle of April, when the sun goes into your third house, you're going to start putting them into action. And I feel like once you start putting them into action, opportunities are just going to come to you very easily, because with this beginning half of April, you're really setting that firm vision in place. You're setting those goals in place. You're really setting this foundation. I said foundation. so many times, but you're really setting this structure, this firm structure in place. And towards the end of April, you're going to start getting these opportunities just like rolling in for you because you already have your vision. So it's almost like you're creating a magnet for opportunity to be affluent in your life. Mercury is also going to be in your second house, so you're really having this concentrated energy in your second house, and I feel like this also relates to your self-worth as well. I think I mentioned this in your Aries new moon prediction video, but you're really getting this huge burst of confidence in April. You're getting this whole new almost perspective on yourself, and I feel like with this Mercury in the second house, you're becoming so much more communicative about your values. Second house is values as well, and I feel like again with Pisces there's this theme and this karmic theme of lacking boundaries or not stating your boundaries or not asserting yourself, and I feel like this self-assertion that is present with this Aries new moon in your second house and Mercury being in your second house in April, it's just solidifying your sense of self. And once you solidify yourself, I feel like you're able to navigate the world much more strongly, much more successfully, without just crumbling at the first sign of defeat. On a day-to-day basis during April, you're going to be focused a lot on the material things. It's kind of like a month for you where you're focused on money, maybe you're focused on aesthetics, indulgence. There is kind of like this indulgence theme with the second house too, so to have that energy magnified, I feel like you're really focused on kind of like your immediate material surroundings. Back in like Pisces season, you're more so focused on like the spiritual aspect of things, but in April you're really like anchoring yourself down to this physical realm and creating physical material success for yourself, not just this spiritual fantasy you might have cultivated in Pisces season. And that also reminds me too, I feel like during retrograde you might have been in fantasy mode. I mean, Pisces is usually in fantasy mode, but you might have been in fantasy mode, had visions and like all these creative things that might have been just in your mind. It might have been just very imaginative, but I feel like in April you're really solidifying or making those dreams you imagined in Pisces season, making them a reality. There's this whole theme for you of, you know, the intangible becoming tangible in April. And so that reminds me too, if you're watching this, tell me down below if you're a Pisces sun, moon, or rising, and what resonates the most when you watch prediction videos. Okay, so let's talk about a really major event happening in April for you. So during April, Mars and Saturn is actually going into your 12th house. And of course, this presents kind of like a lot of challenges for you, but a lot of opportunities as well. And so I'll talk about the challenges in a second, but let's talk about kind of like this energy that Mars and Saturn in the 12th house even brings for you. So immediately what comes to mind with this energy is this sense of productive solitude. When it comes to Pisces energy, like I said, you can be very imaginative. You can have these fantasies, these visions, especially just coming out of Pisces season. You've been very much in that intangible spiritual space. And so with Saturn and Mars entering your 12th house, the 12th house is the house of Pisces. It's the house of imagination, fantasies, and things you can't really touch, right? So Saturn's coming in, Mars is coming into your 12th house and making things tangible. As I mentioned, there's a sense of tangibility with the month of April for you. And specifically though, with Mars and Saturn being there, it's like Saturn really wants to put structure to things. It wants to make things a reality. And Mars gives you the boldness, the fearlessness, and the willpower to do that. So I sense for Pisces, you're really going to be inspired by this 12th house energy. Like I said, there's a challenging aspect to it I will discuss, but Mars and Saturn, it really wants to put structure to things. It wants to lead things. I see you really just being in your zone and accomplishing whatever you need to accomplish. Now, this is a very kind of solitary energy. It's not very social. So although obviously you're probably going to be social during April, or at least maybe not, but it is very productive solitude. Like I said, it's the kind of solitude where you just get things done. I see you having sort of like this laser vision of what you need to get done and just having that motivation to do so. Now, Mars doesn't really do well in the 12th house. Mars is kind of weak in the 12th house. But I think with the Saturn kind of propelling that Mars and supporting that Mars, I see more productivity for you rather than just laziness. So this solitude that you will experience in April is very necessary for your success. It's necessary for achievement. You're very much grounded in the material world in April, and it's really going to benefit you to merge with that energy and make tangible results out of your fantasies and imagination. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the challenges of these transits. So Pisces, the significant challenge that you might experience is that you have Mars in your 12th house, right? Mars is going into your 12th house, Saturn's going to be there too, and so Mars actually rules your second house of finances. And so when you have this ruler of your second house, which is Mars, go to your 12th house, there is a sense of losing money, spending money on irrelevant things, or just kind of like having unnecessary or unseen expenses. So the main issue here is that although of course you are, taking control of your finances, you're being more responsible with them, taking initiative with it, like I said, you're very sunken down into the material world in April. But with the second house ruler being in the 12th, it kind of presents money issues for you. It presents kind of like this sense of not gaining control of your finances, or trying to gain control of it and then losing control, or trying to gain control of it or making a mistake, or spending too much or not spending enough. So there's really like this slippery slope with your finances that you have to watch out for. And it's not the month to like overspend. Like that's the biggest thing I pulled from reading your chart, is that it's not the month to overspend. It's not the month to splurge too much. It's not the month to be reckless with your finances. Again, I feel like you're really kind of being tested here with this energy, because Pisces, it might struggle with boundaries, and in order to have, the kind of money you want or earn the kind of income you want, you have to have boundaries with your spending. So I think you're going to be challenged with maintaining those boundaries in April, but it's important to just keep in mind your financial goal, your financial plan, create one if you don't have one, and don't stray too far from that, because if you do, it doesn't look too great financially for you. So really just be wary about finances, how you spend your money, where it's going. Really make sure like you're not overcharged for stuff, and like little things like that might happen to you in April. So just be careful of that. Also, as I mentioned, Saturn's going to be in your 12th. So I feel like Saturn is kind of helping you out in your 12th house, because Saturn is really going to give you that productive boost that the 12th house kind of doesn't give you on its own. So I feel like you're going to get a lot of productivity in April. In April, you're going to receive a lot of opportunities for growth, a lot of opportunities for expansion and financial success, but it's really up to you to be prepared for them and be discerning about what opportunities you receive, and maintain your boundaries when it comes to money and values. And there are some other interesting things happening for you in April, but I'm going to talk about it more in my April predictions part 2 video, so you guys want to stay tuned for that. Also subscribe to my channel so you don't miss it, and I have more astrology content on my Instagram, so you guys can go follow me at AstroKit, and I'll see you Pisces in my next video. Okay, so let's talk about the month of April for Aquarius. Okay, Aquarius, so as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, April is such a pivotal moment for a lot of us, for the collective at large, and I'm gonna really explain what that means for you as an Aquarius, Sun, Moon, or Rising, and how that influences your everyday life. So Aquarius, as I mentioned in your Aries new moon prediction video, there's this concentration on your 3rd house. The Sun is going to be in your 3rd house during most of April, and then the second half of April it's going to be in your 4th house. And so with this concentration of 3rd house energy, Sun's going to be in your 3rd house and Mercury is going to be there too. This is just a time for you where it's really about self-expression. I know that's the theme I mentioned in the Aries new moon video, and that's also just the theme for April for you in general. And really, to put everything into context, in April you also have Mars in your 1st house, you have Saturn in your 1st house. So I just feel for Aquarius, you have this very inspired energy. There's this energy for you where it's like you want to express from your soul. And so I feel like you're really done with stifling yourself or stifling your ideas. I feel like you feel so inspired and so motivated to just express what you feel, express your thoughts. You're at this point in April where you're really expressing from your inner child. You're expressing from your soul. This isn't just, random things that you're thinking or, random ideas. I feel like you're very much channeling like this divine creativity that you're meant to express in this lifetime. So not only are you expressing these ideas, but you're also exchanging them as well. This is a month for you where you do feel very, it's kind of like almost like a buzz, like a very ecstatic, very electric energy for you. That's kind of like the vision I'm getting for Aquarius, where you're exchanging ideas, you're expressing your ideas on different mediums through different ways. Obviously that's kind of like the bright side with this whole quarantine thing, is that, you know, if you're at home, you are like, I don't know, creating things, you're writing things, you're exchanging ideas with your friends. Like you're just, I feel like you're using this time to be very productive and get what you want manifested into your reality. Okay, so let's talk about this Mars and Saturn in your first house. So before we get into that, tell me down below if you're an Aquarius, sun, moon, or rising, and when you watch prediction videos, what's the most accurate for you? So Mars and Saturn being in your first house is such powerful energy. I feel like as we're in the age of Aquarius, I feel like Aquarius are really taking charge now. I feel like they're really stepping into their true power. And it's funny because the way I titled your prediction is that you're boldly leading the herd. And so I feel like there's like this uprising of like Aquarius people, Aquarius placements, just really stepping into their power and leading others. I feel like you're really taking on a sense of leadership in April, whether it be professionally, socially, just even on a grand scale or just in your community. I feel like you're becoming a leader. And like I said, you're taking these visions that are very much channeled from your inner child and putting them into the world and leading people with these ideas, leading people, you know, in a beneficial way based on what you believe to be true and based on your own creativity. And so you're really taking this bold action to unify people, this bold action to unify the collective. Like I said, this can be on a small scale, medium scale, large scale, but I feel like you're really coming into this peak Aquarius energy, like this Aquarius energy that's like the archetypical leader, the archetypical, you know, principal figure, politician figure. It's not like you're literally those things, but that's the kind of energy that Aquarius brings, right? It's like unifying the collective. It's all about unity. And I feel like now unity is something we definitely need in the world. And I feel like you guys have a special vision about unity that needs to be manifested, and I think it's important and in April that you do that. And so also with this Mars Saturn dynamic in your first house, Mars is a very bold energy. It can be kind of egotistical too, but you have Saturn too. So Saturn is more mature, it's more responsible. So I feel like those two planets together, they're not aspecting each other, but they're both in your first house. And I feel like it's kind of like Saturn is putting that ego in check and turning you into a more mature, stable leader. And so let's talk about Saturn really quickly, because I feel like it's the most important thing happening in your chart in April. And so with Saturn, ultimately what Saturn wants to do is bring order. Saturn is the planet of checks and balances. Saturn isn't about emotions. It's not about frivolous things. It's about what the reality is, what the truth is, bare bones and all. What are we dealing with here? So to have this in your first house, it really represents this reality check. And I feel like it's a very productive reality check, just because Saturn does pretty well in the sign of Aquarius. So it wants to achieve order in maybe not the most conventional way. This could be a time for you where, you know, you're kind of deviating from the norm a bit, but it's kind of like, I feel like you're deviating from the norm, but it helps others in the process, if that makes sense. It's almost like the final vision and the final outcome is to create order, and that order that's going to be created is first done through chaos. So I feel like you're initiating yourself into this process of creating order and unity and balance and manifesting your ideas. There might be a little bit of chaos first, but Saturn ultimately wants to create that order. And also Saturn really brings this almost very serious energy as well. So even though there's like this kind of childlike, you know, creativity, like electric energy that's going on for you in April, Saturn is kind of, you know, he's kind of checking you a bit. He's kind of putting all of that on. He's, I wouldn't say restrict completely. So he's really putting it in check ultimately. And I feel like it's really making you very productive. I think you have this really great balance in April of you feeling creative and inspired, but still I feel like you have the motivation and the infrastructure to create, you know, your intangible ideas into tangible ones. Specifically with Saturn in the first house, you might be perceived as more serious. You might be act more serious on a daily basis. Maybe you start dressing more seriously or kind of just maturing a lot more. I feel like Saturn is the sign of, Saturn is more like the planet of maturity, the planet of old age, literally. So I feel like with it being in your first house, I feel like you're going to be behaving more maturely on a daily basis. There's almost like this instant like maturity phase you're going through in April where you're becoming more responsible and viewing your life and seeing how you can add more structure to it in a very productive way. And so let's talk a little bit about the major challenges you're going to face in April. So the major challenges you can experience in April is this sense of maintaining your patience. So with this Mars energy in your first house and then your third house is really activated, both of those things, both of those areas in your chart are kind of impatient. Those are impatient energies. The third house is impatient, and Mars is definitely impatient. So I feel like you're gonna be tested a little bit with your patience. I feel like Saturn being in your first house is a really great transit for you right now, but still I think Saturn is still gonna, put you to the test and see if you really can not get too fired up or not be too reactive towards things. I feel like you're gonna have to see things see the larger vision in things and not be too consumed in just the smaller minute aspect of it. I feel like you're really being asked in April to see the long-term vision. As an Aquarius, I feel like you're already very skilled at that, but that's gonna be what you need to focus on in times where your patience is tested, is just seeing the long-term outcome, the long-term vision and results. Because I feel like there's gonna be moments where you're just like, you're gonna want to quit or not be too invested in manifesting your ideas, but I feel like you're gonna have to see that bigger vision and still be inspired anyway. Just on a day-to-day basis, I don't know if I mentioned this, but more on a day-to-day basis in an everyday sense, because your third house is so activated and your sun is moving into the fourth house later in April, I feel like you're going to be doing a lot of creative activities at home. I feel like you're going to be very invested in just investing your time into your hobbies. And that's another thing I think I wrote down for you, is that you're going to spend a lot of time focusing on your hobbies. And I feel like the two main themes for you in April is the sense of investing your time in your hobbies, your creative ideas, and just being a leader, leading the pack somehow. And I feel like this theme that's being set with leadership in April is going to really you're going to see that same thread be present in every single month later this year. And so there is a really big blessing coming towards you in April. And if you want to find out what that is, stay tuned for my next video, which is my April predictions part 2. And until then, you guys can follow me on Instagram at AstroKit, and I'll see you Aquarius in my next video. Okay, so let's talk about the month of April for Capricorn. Okay, so as I mentioned, April is a huge month for the collective, and I'm going to explain what that means for you as a Capricorn sun, moon, or rising. So the way I would title your month of April for you Capricorn is that it's a month where you are building foundations. So in April, the sun is going to be in your fourth house for most of the month. And then in the second half of the month, it's actually going to go to your fifth house. So during April, I feel like you're really going to be focused on your home life. That's a huge theme I mentioned in your Aries new moon prediction video, where you're focused on where you come from, you're focused on your foundations. And I feel like in April specifically, you're really focused on setting a really firm foundation. As a Capricorn, you're somebody who has a lot of long-term goals. You guys think very far ahead, years into the future. And I feel like this is a month for you where you're really focused on setting the foundation for your long-term goals to be successful. And fourth house energy does represent home. It represents roots as well. And I feel like it really represents this sense of concentration. It's this sense of really honing in and channeling your energy into one source. So for you, you're really going to be feeling that energy is going to be very potent for you because you have Sun and Mercury both in your 4th house. And so let's talk about this Mercury a little bit. So Mercury, it's the planet of communication. It's this planet of speaking and just anything having to do with language, right? And 4th house is the house of roots, home, and family. So I feel like with this, collection of energy, I feel like you are being very intuitive during this time. Like I said, it's very concentrated energy, and you're going to be so concentrated mentally on your goals, on your vision. Whatever your long-term 10-year, 5-year plan is, you're really focused on drafting that out in April, setting the plan in April, having that, unshakable, sturdy foundation for those long-term visions you have. Really in April, I sense for Capricorns that you're going to be, shifting your decision-making skills from being just rooted in ego or being rooted in just pure logic. I feel like you're going to shift it to being more heart-based, to being more intuitive. This is very intuitive energy for you. The 4th house is the house of Cancer. It is a water house. So I feel like you're going to be very much invested in creating your legacy and planting the seeds and creating this foundation, but doing it from your heart, doing it from your intuition, from your emotions. And I feel like there's this real sense of just being very genuinely, creating what you want, genuinely doing it from your heart space, not from your ego. And then just on a day-to-day basis in April, you're going to be probably more of a homebody. Of course, that's very fitting because we have the quarantine going on, but especially for you, I feel like you're going to be very productive at home. You're going to get a lot done. You're going to have this urge to want to restructure your home maybe, or start something new, like a new home project. Either way, there's this emphasis on home for you in April, and I feel like on your day-to-day life, you're really going to see those themes really merge and come to your consciousness on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so another major event happening for you in April that's really going to change your life is that both Mars and Saturn are moving into your 2nd house. So I really want to talk about what that means because I feel like this is such an important energy for you. But before I get into that, tell me down below if you're a Capricorn Sun, Moon, or Rising watching this, and what's more accurate when you watch prediction videos. Is it more accurate for your Sun, Moon, or Rising? So with Mars and Saturn both in your 2nd house, this is very pivotal for you because 2nd house is all about finances. 2nd house is also about this sense of foundations. I think that's the biggest theme, the biggest thread for you in April is this theme of foundations. And so Saturn is this planet of, putting structure to things, creating order. That's the ultimate goal of Saturn. So I feel like with Saturn entering your 2nd house, you're going to be more focused on creating order within your finances, creating order within your goals, or structuring your goals in such a way that it is financially beneficial to you. And the biggest theme I get from this is that there's this real sense of strategizing going on for you. Just in general, there's this theme of strategizing, but especially with Saturn in the 2nd, it's all about doing things in the most beneficial way. And also with Mars entering your 2nd house, Mars is very bold energy. It's very forward energy. It's very initiatory energy that initiates. And so I feel like you're going to be initiating a lot of financial strategies, a lot of financial plans. Either way, you're really focused on creating this solid, unshakable foundation by any means necessary. And also with Mars and Saturn entering your 2nd house, it really draws on this theme of financial independence. Again, I feel like that's another kind of Capricorn theme anyway, where you guys are really focused on security, financial independence, achieving these goals, having these 10-year plans. And I feel like especially in April, you're setting the groundwork for that. And I feel like it is ultimately leading you towards financial independence. I think that's a major theme for the collective at large, is that I feel like we all need to achieve some sort of financial independence. And I feel like you guys are the ones that are kind of pioneering that ship. You're kind of leading that ship of financial independence, and it's something you're going to achieve. And I feel like the plan to achieve that is going to be set by you in April. So despite the fact that this Saturn and Mars energy does bring you quite a bit of productivity and the sense of creating stable foundations, Mars and Saturn are still malefic planets, so let's talk about what challenges they might bring you in April. So with Mars, as I mentioned, it's a very, bold, initiatory energy, and it is very impatient. So when it's in the second house, you might find yourself in dynamics where you want to spend your money impatiently or spend impulsively. It's this kind of impulsive energy, so you have to watch out for that being a challenge for you when it comes to creating this foundation for yourself and creating plans and stuff, to not be too impatient with it. And then Saturn as well. Saturn is a malefic, like I said, and although it does very well in Aquarius, it still represents a sense of restriction. So I feel like you might deal with this tension or challenge of restricting yourself too much versus spending too much, or being too impulsive or being too stagnant. So you really have to balance those two things out, because Saturn is gonna kind of bring that stagnant, restrictive energy, and then Mars is going to want to do things and be impulsive. So they kind of don't go together in that sense, but I think if you leverage it correctly, it's going to be more productive than it is harmful to you. So when Saturn enters a new house, it does bring challenges to that house. So as I mentioned, the second house is the house of finance, so you can see some financial issues going on, some financial troubles, or kind of unforeseen financial troubles. So it's important to just kind of be mindful of that and not be too impatient about trying to correct it, or being really vigilant about how your money goes out and how it comes in. Let's talk a little bit about that transition of the sun being in your fourth house to the sun going to your fifth house. So with the sun going from your fourth to fifth house in April, I feel like you're gonna be very concentrated, very intuitive, very much of a homebody in a social sense and obviously in a physical sense in April. But then as that sun moves to your fifth house, you're going to be more concerned about pleasure, more concerned about a sense of creativity, a sense of fun. I feel like there's this very serious, very, plan-oriented, strategizing energy for you overall in your life right now in the next couple months. But I feel like in April, you're going to kind of feel more of a funner vibe towards the end. And especially with Saturn moving from your first to second house, you're going to feel that very serious, restrictive energy. But I feel like you're going to see the optimism within that. You're going to see the fun within that, the pleasure within that. And it's important to still indulge in things that you like and not be too serious, despite this heavy Saturn energy for you. So there are some really big blessings coming your way in April. And if you want to find out what those are, stay tuned for my next video. And until then, you guys can follow me on Instagram at AstroKit, and I'll see you Capricorns in my next video. Okay, so let's talk about the month of April for Sagittarius. So Sagittarius, the month of April is very significant for you and for the collective at large, and I'm going to tell you guys what that specifically means in your everyday life. So Sagittarius, sun, moon, or rising, the way I would characterize the month of April for you is that it's all about this sense of soul expression. So let's dive into your chart and see exactly what that looks like. So for you, during the first half of April, the sun's going to be in your fifth house, and then it's going to transition slowly into your sixth house. And Mercury is also going to be sitting in your fifth house as well. So overall, there's this very fifth house energy activated for you, and the fifth house is all about pleasure. It's about fun. It's really about your inner child as well, and expressing yourself from your inner child. And so during April for you, I feel like you're really going to be focused on your own sense of creativity, your own sense of having fun. What does fun look like to you? What does pleasure look like to you? I feel like you're going to be really focused on manifesting those things and acting in a way that supports what you think is fun, supports what you think is pleasurable. And I feel like even more significantly, what you're doing here is merging that into your daily lifestyle. As a Sagittarius, I feel like you're somebody who definitely is all about lifestyle, all about living their life to the fullest, all about being bold and adventurous. And this is definitely a month for you where that energy is even more magnified. And if it's not magnified for you, it's going to be magnified in April. So I feel like you're going to be really focused on being like, okay, how can I incorporate my hobby into my everyday life? How can I incorporate this fun thing that I do once in a while? How can I do it more often? You're going to be in this very playful, kind of happy, almost blissful state in April. And so really, if we think about the fifth house does represent our soul. And why does it represent our soul? It represents our inner child, and our inner child often represents what our soul is. In April, you're going to be very much in that vibration of your inner child, of whatever your soul looks like. And there's this huge potential for soul expression for you in April, and it's going to manifest in so many different ways, obviously depending on your life, but I feel like it's going to manifest in a way that just attracts people towards you that are also on that same vibration. And it's going to attract people towards you in a romantic sense too. Fifth house is also romance. So I feel like a lot of the romances you have in April, or if you're in a relationship or anything that has to do with like interacting with someone romantically, even just like flirting, it's going to be so much in alignment with your true inner soul. It's going to be in alignment with what you find to be fun, what you find to be pleasurable. And I feel like you're going to have a lot of kind of dating success in that sense in April. And so when it comes to that transition of the sun going from your 5th house to your 6th house, I feel like in April, there's going to be a moment where it's like, okay, I've had fun, now it's time to get to work. And I feel like you're going to feel more of that productive, kind of more work-like energy towards the end of April. But in the beginning, it's more kind of wholesome, pure, blissful, and sort of childlike. And on a day-to-day basis in April, you can expect to just be more creative. Maybe on a day-to-day basis, you're just doing your hobbies. You're not really, I feel like you kind of have like sort of like a carefree attitude. And maybe you're doing your hobbies, you're doing creative projects, things having to do with work, anything like that. I feel like you're going to be focused on more so your hobbies and what you find pleasurable and fun in April, and you're going to be doing that on a daily basis, whatever you find to be fun or pleasurable. And really, you're just doing what makes you truly happy. Okay, so a really big major event happening for you in April is that Mars and Saturn are going to be in your 3rd house. So this is really pivotal, important, and just like life-changing for you. And I'm going to tell you guys why, but before I tell you, tell me down below if you're a Sagittarius sun, moon, or rising, and when you watch prediction videos, do you resonate more with your sun, moon, or rising sign? So Mars and Saturn are both entering your 3rd house, and those are 2 malefic planets in astrology. Those are 2 of the most important planets in astrology, especially as it pertains to achievement. And so 3rd house is all about self-expression. So first, let's touch on Mars a little bit. So basically, Mars in the 3rd house in April, I feel like you're gonna feel more bold about expressing yourself and more bold about expressing your creative ideas. There's this kind of like childlike theme going on with you in April. Like I said, the sun is in your 5th house. The 5th house represents, you know, this childlike sense of expression and creativity, and 5th house also literally represents children. And then 3rd house is kind of like this childlike energy as well. So you have this kind of childlike energy going on, and Mars being there, I feel like you're more motivated to express yourself, more motivated to express your ideas. I can almost see it manifesting as like you just like saying what you feel, or saying introducing your ideas to people maybe you wouldn't have said out loud before. I feel like you're either way just kind of collaborating and bringing your ideas to the forefront in a very bold, unapologetic, very Mars themed way. So there's a lot to be expressed for you in April. There's a lot you want to express, but there's a specific way to do it. And so I feel like Saturn being in your 3rd house, now Saturn is the planet of restriction, the planet that represents structure. Ultimately, Saturn wants to bring order to things. It wants to bring structure to things. So I feel like Saturn is kind of putting all of that kind of like childlike energy in place for you. More so it's putting that childlike energy in check for you. It's positioning you in a way to make you a little bit more productive, even though you're going to feel a little bit more childlike and less kind of controlled. I feel like you're still going to be wanting to put structure to that because Saturn is going to be in your 3rd house. And so honestly, Saturn does pretty well in the 3rd house, and it's going to be in Aquarius. It does well in the sign of Aquarius. So I feel like you're going to experience more of the productive side of Saturn. I know Saturn gets kind of like this scary reputation, but I feel like you're going to experience more of the positive sides of Saturn. So what is the positive sides of Saturn? Saturn is going to bring you the ability to have discipline, to be discerning. That's the biggest theme with this Saturn in the 3rd house transit, is that you're going to become more able to view things and balance it out mentally, or decide whether it's a good decision or not a good decision, or decide whether it's a good decision or not a good decision. And then also what Saturn is going to do for you is that it's going to help you put structure to your ideas, structure to your creative self-expression. And I feel like it's going to bring structure in a very productive way, in a sense where it's like, okay, maybe you have an idea for something, and you have no plan of achieving it, or you have no plan of manifesting it. And I feel like what Saturn is doing is kind of being like, okay, here's your tools, here's what you have to do. It's kind of giving you this productive energy. So there's also going to be kind of like this sense of spontaneity too, where you just kind of want to do things, not think about it. And I feel like that's naturally kind of like in the Sagittarius description, but I feel like Saturn is kind of like, well, wait, you have to do this first, you have to do this. It's really this very restrictive energy, but kind of restrictive in a positive way, not really restrictive in a detrimental way. So let's talk about the challenges this transit does bring for you. So I definitely feel like the challenge and the tension you're really gonna feel in April is the sense of discipline versus pleasure. And like I mentioned, there's this huge theme of pleasure for you, this huge theme of fun and being kind of like childish and all this stuff. But again, you have this Saturn here. The Saturn in the third house is really gonna kind of prompt you to be a little bit more disciplined, a little bit more restrictive and discerning. And it's important not really to fight that. It's important to not really shirk your responsibilities, because Saturn brings like this sense of tests, or sense of testing you. And so in April, I feel like you might be tested in a sense, and it's important to really like face your responsibilities and not just escape them too much in April. Because if you do try to escape things in April and not deal with them directly, it's gonna kind of bite you in the butt later on down the line. And so although soul expression is this major theme for you in April, it's still important to add structure to that somehow. It's still important to kind of make sure whatever you're manifesting from your soul does have some sort of foundation, does have some sort of ground to stand on. And obviously that's, you know, being stemmed from this Saturn in the third house. And although you're going to feel this urge to manifest in an impulsive way due to the Mars in the third house, it's important to kind of just restrict it a bit and make it more realistic. And so really towards the end of the month, in like the latter half of April, you're going to be a little bit more tempered out. I think in the beginning of April, you're going to be a little bit all over the place, I guess. But like I said, more from a perspective of being like in this very childlike vibration and expressing from your soul. But towards the end of the month, I feel like you're going to be more into channeling your energy in a more productive way and adding more structure to maybe some of the creative ideas you have or creative self-expression you have, and making a plan for it and making it realistic. So there is a really big blessing coming your way in April, and if you want to find out what that is, stay tuned for my next video. And until then, you guys can follow me on Instagram at AstroKit, and I'll see you Sagittarius in my next video. Okay, so let's talk about the month of April for Scorpio. Okay, Scorpio, sun, moon, or rising. As you guys know, there has been a lot going on, and April brings in a whole transformational energy for the collective. And as a Scorpio, you're probably really familiar with the concept of transformation, and I'm going to explain how the astrological events will affect you in particular on a day-to-day basis. So in April for Scorpios, the title that really describes your month, that characterizes it, is that it's all about you working on a master plan. And again, I feel like that's a very Scorpio thing to do, always strategizing, always trying to achieve things and work on plans. But let's take a look at where this energy is really being concentrated and where you're really focusing your energy in April. So in April, the sun will be in your 6th house for kind of like the first half of April, and then the second half of April the sun moves into your 7th house. So really with this energy, and as I mentioned in my Aries new moon prediction video for you guys, this is energy of being very productive, being very health oriented. In the midst of this health crisis we're going through, this is definitely a time where you're being very vigilant about your health. I feel like this is the time where you're like the main one, really advocating for steps to be healthier and have a productive, healthier lifestyle overall. And so this productive energy is really fueling your drive towards your career, towards your goals. As I mentioned, there's this energy of concentration. There's this energy of you making a master plan, creating a master vision, and that has a lot to do with your career, with your work, and working on achieving some sort of goal in the midst of everything that's going on. And really for you, Scorpio, I feel like April is a month of concentration for you. I feel like you're somebody who is skilled at dealing with crisis situations. So granted, the fact we're in a crisis situation, I feel like this is something you're prepared for. I feel like out of anyone, you're the most prepared for any type of crisis. And that's not really a bad thing. I feel like that's your strength in life as a Scorpio. And so you're really going to see that highlighted in April. And I feel like a lot of people that are close to you will lean on you for support, kind of respect how strong you're being, things like that. And I feel like that's what's going to kind of get you through this. And in the midst of all that, I feel like the positive that's going to happen for you is, you know, career elevation, career improvement. I feel like there's something in your career that is going to be initiated, maybe because of this crisis, or just something you've been planning and working on and concentrating on for a very long time. And so as the sun makes its way from your 6th house to your 7th house, so as I mentioned, the second half of April, the sun will be in your 7th house. I feel like you're going to take a lot of this energy that you've been kind of, I guess, concentrating within yourself, and you're going to start sharing it with other people. 7th house is the house of partnerships. And specifically for you, Scorpio, I feel like you're going to develop very important business partnerships. As I mentioned, there's this theme of concentration and concentrating on your career and your goals. And I feel like in the end of April, you're going to receive opportunities that pertain to business partnerships, business dealings, some sort of situation having to do with a contract, anything along those lines. And so whatever business goal you have or career goal you have, you're going to receive a partnership or attract a partner towards you that supports that goal. And then on kind of like more of like a romantic aspect of this, because 7th house is partnerships, whether they be romantic or business, I feel like you're going to attract, or you're starting to attract, more purposeful partners towards you, more connections that are deeper. I feel like in this point in your life and in April, you're going to find this theme of, you know, authentic and meaningful and purposeful connections. That's something you truly deserve in this life. And I feel like that's something that you need moving forward in your spiritual journey. And having shallow connections isn't something that fulfills you anymore. So in April, I feel like you should really look out for new business partnerships as well as new romantic partnerships too. But I feel like business partnerships are more emphasized, and then meaningful, purposeful partnerships is emphasized as well. And then also Mercury is going to be in your 6th house. So again, there's this very productive energy, obviously, but specifically with Mercury, I feel like this is the energy of you healing things, of you fixing things. On an emotional level as well as spiritual level, I see you just being very vigilant about your health in a mental space, in a physical space, and as well as an emotional space and spiritual space too. And on a day-to-day basis, this Mercury energy represents you really caring for your health and being very healthy on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so let's talk about a major event affecting you in April. And before I tell you guys what that is, go ahead and tell me down below if you're a Scorpio sun, moon, or rising, and when you watch prediction videos, which is more accurate for you. Okay, so the major thing that's happening for you, Scorpio, in April is that Mars and Saturn are both going into your 4th house. So this is really big because Mars and Saturn are two of the main malefic planets in astrology, and they represent a lot of changes and will bring a lot of change to whatever house they enter. But let's talk about Mars first, and then we'll get into Saturn. We'll save the best for last. So with Mars is a very bold energy. It's a very aggressive energy, and hence why it is a malefic planet. But with it being in your 4th house, it really brings about this theme of concentration yet again. And when it comes to 4th house, it's naturally associated with Cancer. It's a water house. So to have this very aggressive, bold energy in the 4th house, it really kind of tames that down a bit. It kind of tames it in a way that is kind of, like I said, emulates this energy of concentration. So there's a really productive side to this energy, and then there's kind of like more shadow side to it. So with this Mars in the 4th house, even more than concentration, I feel like it really represents you being very discerning. It's an energy where it's like you're very much held back before you act on something. It's kind of, like I said, it kind of tempers Mars down a bit and makes it less impulsive. So therefore, in your daily life and in April, I feel like you're going to make less impulsive decisions. You're really going to think about things before you do them and be very discerning before you just jump into things. And this also represents that in your life, you are really solidifying your foundation before you jump into things. As I mentioned, there's kind of like this element of chaos, obviously, in our society right now. And I feel like you're like out of anyone the most concentrated person and the most focused person on whatever it is that is important to you. I feel like at this moment in time, you're being very discerning, very concentrated on what you want and really taking time to think before you impulsively act. And I can almost imagine that even though a lot of people are like on panic mode, I feel like you're not going to be too much on panic mode in April. Okay, so let's talk about Saturn really quickly. So Saturn enters your 4th house, and in April, what this represents for you is that Saturn is all about restriction. It's this planet that is, you know, about order, creating structure to things. It's a very important planet in astrology. It is malefic, but still very important in our birth chart. So Saturn entering your 4th house, it does represent a bit of a challenge, but I'll tell you guys the challenging part of it in a second. But Saturn in the 4th house, it's energy that is very, again, it's very stabilizing. 4th house is the house of home. It's the house of your past, your roots. So this could be a time where you feel compelled to act more in tune with your truest self or act more in tune with your intuition. This is definitely energy for you with all this 4th house energy being activated, where you're acting on your intuition more than anything. You're following the lead of your intuition. You're not following the lead of your ego. You're following the lead of your spiritual self, your higher self, and you're not paying attention to distractions. That's a huge thing, I feel like, for Scorpios. That's a theme for you during the month, is you're just not paying attention to distractions. You're being very focused on what you want. And I will say the main challenge with Saturn entering your 4th house is that it is kind of like a karmic energy. 4th house represents the past. So sometimes when we have planets transiting there, or if we have planets there natally, you can have this habit to repeat past mistakes, or it kind of feels like this backtrack type of energy. So you really have to be mindful about not backtracking in April. There's this huge momentum very much pushing you forward in April, but it's important not to get too caught in the past or too caught in your past mistakes. And I feel like you're going to persevere and like obviously move forward, but there's going to be times in April where you are tested to go backwards, but you have to remember to keep your eye on the future goals. And I also will say, with this Saturn and Mars being in your 4th house in April, this could be a time where you're feeling a lot more private, a lot more secluded. Again, I feel like that's a natural Scorpio trait to be very private, but especially in April, you're going to be inclined to just be by yourself, to be inwardly turned, to be focused on your own goals, your own emotions, and less outwardly turned. I feel like that's the main energy in the beginning half of April. You're gonna feel it throughout the whole month, but in the beginning half especially, because the sun will be in your 6th house, and then by the time the sun enters your 7th house, you'll be ready to like socialize again. So I would say the main challenge for you in April is just repeating your past mistakes, or backtracking, so to speak. But there is a major key to your success in April and a major blessing coming your way. And if you want to find out what that is, stay tuned for my next video. And in the meantime, you can follow me on Instagram at AstroKit, and I'll see you Scorpios in my next video. So let's talk about the month of April for Libra. Okay, so April is obviously a really huge month. It's a very transformational, very pivotal month, and we're going to talk about how that affects Libra, Sun, Moon, and Rising, and how it affects you astrologically. So the quote that really characterizes your month and something that really represents the themes you're gonna experience is this theme of being driven by passion. So we're really gonna talk about what this passion even is and how it relates to your life. First, let's talk about what the sun is doing in your chart in April. So in April, for the beginning half of April, the sun is going to be in your 7th house, and then towards the end, it moves into your 8th house. And as I mentioned in your new moon prediction video, there's this huge concentrated energy around relationships for you. Specifically, there's this energy of starting new relationships, starting new patterns in your relationships. There's just so much emphasis on relationships for you, which is ironic because you're a Libra and you symbolize relationships astrologically. But specifically though, when it comes to relationships, there's this theme for you in April where you're either intensifying them, improving them, ending them, or starting them. I do feel for like a lot of Libras, you are starting a new relationship. If you're not starting a new one, I feel like you're definitely starting new patterns within them. And I talk more about that in my new moon video. You guys can check that out. I'll link it down below. But yeah, with Libra, I feel like there's been patterns in partnerships that don't serve you, and you're definitely ending them in April and starting whole new ones that are way more healthy for you. And I definitely feel like you're in this vibe of like kind of improving them, and the way you improve them is through communication. With Mercury sitting in your 7th house during April, you're definitely going to be one to initiate more communication with your partner, or with your partners in general, or people you're friends with. This doesn't have to be just romantic partnerships, by the way, but I feel like you're taking more initiative to be more communicative, to exchange ideas more often. And I feel like you're really initiating this cycle within relationships where you communicate more and you just collaborate in a more harmonious way. And I definitely feel like for a lot of Libras, there's this new element of passion being introduced in your partnerships. I think that might be something that you desire in your partnerships, or something you felt was missing in the past, is not having enough passion, intensity, or just overall bond. And I feel like in April, you're going to be intensifying your relationships overall. And so this intensity especially ramps up when the sun does go into your 8th house. So like I said, the sun's going to be mostly in your 7th house during April, and then I think on like the 20th it goes into your 8th house. So you're really going to feel that shift of like having a partnership and then taking it to the next level. And for a lot of you guys, if you start a new partnership in April, it could be going to the next level by May or so. Okay, so let's talk about that quote I mentioned earlier that was about you being driven by passion during April. So where this sense of passion really comes in is Mars is entering your 5th house. And so this is really significant, and I'm going to tell you guys why. First though, tell me if you're a Libra sun, moon, or rising, and when you watch prediction videos, do you relate more to your sun, moon, or rising sign? So when it comes to this Mars entering your 5th house is all about pleasure. It's about fun. It's about the sense of fulfilling your soul's inner desire. And so having this action-oriented planet of Mars enter your 5th house, you're going to feel very motivated to fulfill your soul's desire. 5th house on like a literal level in astrology, it represents children. It represents our inner child, and our inner child is often linked to our soul and who we really are. So in April, you're going to feel so motivated to just be yourself and pursue things that align with your inner child. You're not going to pursue things that have a facade, or things that are temporary. I feel like you are in a point where you want to pursue things that satisfy you on a soul level and leave you feeling more fulfilled than empty. It's also interesting because 5th house is the house of dating and romance, and you're gonna have Mars there, so your dating life can be more activated, and your 7th house is already activated. So you're just gonna I feel like you're going to be very focused on relationships during April, and especially romantic ones. And really, I feel like this ties to what I said earlier, where it's like you're going to be more communicative in relationships, but honestly, you're probably going to be a lot more flirty, a lot more willing to create an element of fun or pleasure within partnerships. It's not just like a super serious I guess partnership type of thing. I feel like it's more playful too. There's like this element and theme of playfulness in your partnerships as well. Okay, so let's talk about like probably the biggest thing that's happening for you in April, and that is the fact that Saturn is also going into your 5th house. And so as you guys can imagine, your 7th house is really activated, and then your 5th house is really activated. But the fact that you have Saturn and Mars in your 5th house, it's interesting because they're both malefic planets, and they both really represent certain things. And so I kind of already explained Mars, but basically Saturn is this planet that represents restriction. It's this planet that ultimately wants to create order. It wants to create structure. And so with it transiting your 5th house, the challenge it does represent is that it does kind of restrict your sense of pleasure, restrict your sense of fun just a bit. However, the most positive manifestation of this energy is that Saturn wants to bring structure to your creative self-expression. So as I mentioned, you have this drive for passion. You have this urge to express your deepest inner child. And you can do that, but Saturn is going to be there putting you in check. Saturn is kind of like the checks and balances of the solar system, and he wants you to kind of have that outward expression, but kind of be logical about it. Be smart about how you present it. And really for you, Libra, I feel like Saturn is teaching you how to pursue your life's calling, and not just pursue it in an impulsive sense, but really pursue it in a way that profits you in some way, in a way that benefits you, in a way that is productive and adds structure and order to your life. And so for you, Libra, I see this manifesting as you potentially putting structure to your creative hobbies. In the midst of like all this chaos and like quarantine and stuff, obviously you might be at home a lot during April or home a lot now. And I can imagine it for you being a time where you kind of, maybe you pick up an old childhood hobby and then you kind of maybe monetize it, or let's say you used to do, I don't know, crafts when you're a kid, you start doing crafts at home and then you sell it on Etsy. I see that kind of scenario manifesting for Libra. Just because you have this energy, this childlike energy, this childlike passionate energy being emphasized for you. But Saturn is in your 5th house too, putting that in check and asking you to add structure to that, asking you to create a plan for that. So you're taking something that's kind of intangible and very close to your heart and your soul, and you're making it more realistic. So I will mention the challenging aspect and the shadow side of Mars and Saturn in your 5th house. And so Mars and Saturn are still malefic planets, even though there are positive manifestations of them. However, I feel like the challenge or the shadow side of these planets is that it can kind of block your self-expression, especially Saturn can block your creative self-expression. It's a very restrictive energy. So there could be times in April where you do feel inspired, where you do want to express things, but you're going to have to navigate that challenge of how to express it. And that's ultimately what Saturn is teaching you. You might struggle a bit at first with this soul expression or passion expression, just because Saturn wants to test you and see if you can handle it first. And then Mars is a bit of impulsive energy too, so I think that's the shadow side of Mars, where you impulsively want to express things and then Saturn wants to restrict it ultimately. So you're gonna feel that kind of push and pull during April, that kind of tension between Saturn and Aries. Saturn and Mars, which are two very different planets. And you're going to feel that tension regarding very 5th house themed things like pleasure, fun, creativity, passion, and soul expression. But I will say that Mars in the 5th house, I don't know if I mentioned it, but Mars in the 5th transit is I would say it makes you a lot more confident, a lot more bold as well, and a lot more decisive too. So you do have a lot of positive energy working for you, and then some challenging aspects as well. And despite all these challenges, there is a major key to success for you in April and a major blessing coming your way. And if you guys want to find out what that is, stay tuned for my next video. In the meantime, you can follow me on Instagram at AstroKit, and I'll see you Libras in my next video. Okay, so let's talk about the month of April for Virgo. Okay, Virgos, so in April, as you guys can probably guess, it's a very transformative, very pivotal month. And so we're going to talk about what that means in your personal life and how that will manifest on a day-to-day basis. And a quote that really characterizes the month of April for you is that there's this sense of you concentrating your forces. And as I was kind of collecting the information for your reading, I definitely feel this sense of power being culminated. There's this sense of personal power, this sense of really concentrating your power within yourself. And I did touch on that in your new moon prediction, which I have on my channel, but it's just so emphasized for Virgo placements. And this is definitely stemming from the fact that the sun is going to be in your 8th house for most of April, and then it goes into your 9th house for the second half of April, which I'll talk about. But with your sun being in the 8th house, you are kind of familiarizing yourself with the sense of power, the sense of personal power, really focusing on your own inner psychology and how your mind even works. And with this sense of power and this sense of concentration, I feel like you're really focused on and concentrating on your own personal improvement journey. I definitely feel like you have certain goals in your life right now, and you're kind of consulting with yourself on how to reach those goals. You are transforming habits maybe that don't serve you. I feel like you're just really focusing in on what needs to be achieved and how to get from point A to point B. And that involves a lot of strategy, right? So I feel like that's another major theme or action you're going to take in April is strategizing your goals, strategizing how to get to point A to point B, and really strategizing this whole sense of transformation and stepping into your personal power. So speaking of this sense of personal power, another major theme I sensed for you in April as I was doing your reading is definitely this sense of working on your career. I definitely feel for Virgos, you're really focused on career and your work life and professional life. I don't really see you engaging too much in like frivolous activities or just being like very lazy. That's another thing. I see you being very productive, but I don't see you just kind of falling into the distance. I see you really focusing in on what you want to achieve. Even though there is a little bit of chaos going on in the world right now, I think you're taking advantage of it in the sense that you have the ability to self-reflect. You have the time to really concentrate and think of like what you want to achieve in a professional sense. And the 8th house is also a water house. So to have this concentration of energy of like the sun in the 8th house for April, Mercury in the 8th house for April, and the new moon in your 8th house, it's really this energy of being very intuitive and being led by the intuition, being guided by your soul, not being guided by some ego or anything like that. I feel like you're being guided from a very genuine place. The 8th house is also about transformation, and I really feel like you're transforming from the inside out. You're transforming in a very psychological sense, in a mental sense. You're changing really in a great way, but it's starting within. And I feel like a huge part of this transformation for you is that you're really getting rid of fears. 8th house is the house of fears, and to have sun here really gives you the bravery and the courage to face your fears. So if there were any fears that you had, I feel like you're really kind of dissolving them or releasing them in April. And especially I feel like they could be very deep-rooted psychological fears. Like psychological fears you probably weren't even aware of are kind of surfacing themselves in April for you to acknowledge them and then get rid of them. So of course I feel like once you face your fears, acknowledge them, and just kind of release them, that's when you become even more powerful. And overall in April, I really see you kind of gaining the sense of power that's maybe not even literal or physical, but just like this sense of confidence and spiritual power you didn't really have maybe in March. I also will say with 8th house energy, it's always great for manifesting, and especially since you have the new moon in your 8th house, this is a really excellent like manifestation energy. Mercury in the 8th house is really great manifestation energy. You're gonna have Mercury in your 8th house throughout April. So it's a really good energy for manifesting, and especially for you right now, manifesting career goals and what you want to achieve. So let's talk about where things get really interesting. So there is a major event happening in your chart in April, and it's really transformational for you. And so before I tell you guys what that is, tell me down below if you're a Virgo, sun, moon, or rising, and when you watch prediction videos, do you relate more to your sun, moon, or rising sign? Okay, so the really important event that's happening is that Mars and Saturn is going to be in your 6th house. So let's touch a bit on Mars and then we'll talk about Saturn. So we'll save the best for last. But Mars, it's a very ambitious energy. It's a very aggressive, assertive, bold, and fearless energy. And what is the 6th house? 6th house is all about career. It's about productivity. It's about health. It's about work ethic. So in this area of your life, you're really going to be motivated to be more healthy, motivated to be more productive, really motivated towards the sense of career and achieving things within your career. And so with Mars in the 6th house, this is really great energy because Mars definitely wants to be in the 6th house. And it gives you this almost like unshakable fearlessness and boldness to achieve things. And on a mundane level, I could see this manifesting as you being motivated to be more healthy in your day-to-day life, maybe be more strict on your routine. That's definitely a theme. And just really day by day, step by step, doing things that are conducive to your major goals. And this is beneficial because, like I said, you have this energy of concentration really working in your favor. And when you have that energy of concentration and the energy of motivation, you're just like an unstoppable force. Okay, so let's talk about Saturn, because that's definitely one of the biggest things happening for you. And so Saturn is entering your 6th house. And so Saturn is this energy of restriction. Now, I would say that Saturn kind of does well in the 6th house. And so Saturn isn't just about restriction. Ultimately, Saturn wants to create order. It wants to create structure. Sometimes it creates that order and structure through hardship and adversity, but ultimately it does get created, right? So for you, I definitely feel like this works in your favor because it allows you to be motivated to create more structure, to create more order in your life, and really bring structure to any ideas that you have, bring structure to your career goals. Again, I feel like right now Virgo is concentrating on something very specific. You guys can tell me down below what that is, but I feel like it might have to do with career or your goals in life. And this energy of concentration paired with that Saturn energy is going to help you really make things become a reality. Because at the end of the day, Saturn does represent this sense of logic, reality, groundedness, things that are tangible. And so the fact that it's coming from your 5th house and going into your 6th house, I feel like you're really adding structure to maybe your creative hobbies or any sort of goal you have that relates to your ultimate happiness. You're really adding structure to that and making it a reality. And I really see this too as you taking initiative, like taking a lot of initiative to create this structure, to create this goal that you've been manifesting, to create this career goal you've been manifesting. This Mars energy in your 6th house is really going to give you a lot of that boldness, that fearness, and the ability to initiate things. There is ultimately like a shadow side and a challenging side to Saturn in the 6th and Mars in the 6th. And with Saturn in the 6th, I feel like the shadow side of it is that it can prompt you to be very self-critical, to criticize your work too much, to feel a bit discouraged. I feel like discouragement is the big word with Saturn transiting your 6th. So I feel like that's the challenge, but within that challenge, you ultimately find how to create structure, how to improve things so that you don't feel as discouraged. And it's important to not get too discouraged if you feel like you're not achieving things, but to just really remain focused on that larger goal at hand. And then I will say the shadow side of Mars in the 6th transit is that you might feel a little bit restless, especially if your goals aren't manifesting super quickly, or maybe things aren't working out as quickly as you want. You feel a little bit impatient, a little bit antsy, reactive. But like I said, it's important to kind of tame that down. And I feel like Saturn's going to help really restrict that Mars energy. So you might not feel it too much. But at the same time, the big challenge is just being very impulsive and impatient. But despite these major challenges, there is a major key to your success in April and a major blessing coming your way. If you want to find out what that is, stay tuned for my next video. And in the meantime, you guys can follow me on Instagram at AstroKit, and I will see you Virgos in my next video. Okay, so let's talk about the month of April for Leo. Okay, so for you, Leo, Sun, Moon, and Rising, when I was doing your prediction, a quote that came out, and definitely like the title for your April, is the sense of divine alignment. And so there's this really huge emphasis of exciting energy for you, and we're really going to explain what aspects of your life are really going to be impacted in April. So in April for you, there's this definite theme of expansion. During April, you will have the sun in your 9th house, and then towards the end of April, it transitions into your 10th house. And so with this 9th house energy, it's really working in your favor, hence this very exciting sort of vibe for you. And the way it works in your favor is that it really represents expansion of consciousness. This really represents, the sense of optimism. And especially with like the, everything going on right now and the chaos and all this stuff, I feel like out of anyone and out of all the zodiac signs, Leo has a very optimistic outlook on everything. And this optimistic outlook is going to work in your favor because instead of getting caught in the chaos or panic, you have this very clear vision right now. It's almost as if you're seeing things very clearly. You're seeing this vision for your life, right? I think we talked about this in the Aries new moon predictions video I just posted about how you're really manifesting this new vision into your life. And not just manifesting any vision, really manifesting this vision from your soul, from your deepest desires. And so you have this clear sight of your vision, and you have an optimistic outlook on how to achieve it and manifest it into reality. And when it comes to just how you think and your mental processes, you're just really thinking outside of the box right now. You are kind of, as I mentioned, there's like this sense of panic and chaos, right? Just like in the world, but you're seeing the opportunity within that. And that can really be attached to Mercury being in your 9th house during April. Mercury is the planet of communication. It is the planet of thought processes and mental processes. So instead of being in that, chaotic panic mode, you're thinking on a higher vibration. You're thinking about the bigger picture. You're thinking about the opportunities so-called chaos can bring to you. So this optimistic thinking and thinking outside of the box, it's just really working to your advantage in April. And it's going to propel you to a space of success you might have not expected. It's going to propel you to a space where you manifest goals you maybe didn't even think would manifest. And it's not even just like you are being optimistic. I feel like the universe is supporting you in having that energy. And when the universe supports you in doing something, I feel like things manifest way more quickly for you. So that's definitely one of the main things I see for you in April, is that a lot of your visions, or maybe 1, 2, or 3 of your big major goals, are going to manifest in April. And you're going to start seeing the benefits of these manifestations pay off, and really the benefit of just being optimistic during April. And so like I said, the sun is going to be in your 9th house for most of April, and then towards the second half of April, it actually moves to your 10th house. So you start off with this very optimistic, very outwardly seeking, higher thinking type of energy, because you have this 9th house activated, and then the 10th house becomes activated. And the 10th house is all about careers. It's all about this concrete sense of reality. So in April, there's this kind of like flow for you where it's like, okay, you're having these visions, you're expanding your mind, you're expanding your consciousness, just being optimistic overall. And then towards the second half of April, sun moves into your 10th house, and 10th house is a very concrete house. It's a house that really represents things that are material, things that are realistic. So I really see you manifesting these visions into material reality because of this, switch from the 9th to 10th house. And 10th house is also the house of recognition. So I see for a lot of Leos that you might be recognized within your career specifically, or whatever profession you're in, you will be recognized in it, or have the potential to be recognized. Also with the 10th house, it really represents, your relationship with the public. So I can see you kind of being a leader within your career field or professional field during April, especially towards the end. And I really feel like towards the end of April, that's when you're really going to see your optimistic attitude, optimistic outlook really pay off. And, you're going to really see the fruits of your labor because you have this concrete house being activated for you towards the end of April. And also, too, just considering the context of society right now, obviously it's a time where people are quarantined and there's a lot of chaos. But I feel like for Leo, you're going to benefit off this situation. And specifically, the way I see you benefiting is, this is your chance to start your own business. This is your chance to start that Etsy page, start that Shopify store, start some sort of business, and it will prove very successful for you if you do it in April. Not only will it be successful, it'll just be recognized by other people and respected by other people, admired by other people. And you really achieve this success, this recognition, because you're so focused on your goal. You're so focused on this vision you have that it has no choice but to manifest. And the universe has no choice but to help you manifest it. So you're definitely manifesting something big. And I'm really excited for you because of that. But however, let's talk about another major thing happening for you in April, which can be a little bit challenging. Before I get into that, tell me down below if you're a Leo sun, moon, or rising. And when you watch prediction videos, do you relate more to your sun, moon, or rising sign? Okay, but anyway, so in April, Mars and Saturn are both going into your 7th house. So this is so significant because Mars and Saturn are going into Aquarius. Now, this is very unique for you just because Saturn naturally rules your 7th house. Your 7th house is in Aquarius, so you're really going to see a different manifestation of this Saturn energy than you would probably normally see on another type of transit. And so I sense for you, Leo, that you're going to be a lot more motivated to collaborate with others. You're going to be a lot more motivated to just take initiative with other people and sort of be the leader within your partnerships. Depending on your partnerships, whether they're romantic or platonic, maybe there was in the past maybe a lack of initiation between partnerships, or maybe it was hard for you to maintain partnerships because there was just a lack of you taking initiative or being a leader. And so what you're going to see in April is just you being more motivated to collaborate. And I will say that there's kind of like a shadow side to Mars in the 7th, where it kind of makes you more prone to arguments with other people or being a little bit egotistical. It also has this energy of being competitive with other people, which isn't a bad thing, but sometimes being overly competitive at the wrong times or in the wrong context or with the wrong people isn't too productive to your success overall. But the main theme with this Mars in the 7th transit is a lot of leadership. I see you being very bold, taking initiative, and especially as it pertains to other people. Now we can tie this back to your career success that you will probably experience in April, because 7th house is also business partnerships. So I can see you initiating necessary business partnerships to make your business thrive, make your career thrive. Let's say you need a partner with someone to do the marketing for your business, or you need to partner with someone to do some sort of graphic design for your business, or you need an investor. Anything like that, I see you partnering with people or taking the initiative to seek those certain people out to support your career success and manifest that vision that you have. And I feel like in romantic partnerships, it does represent being a little bit more bold and more, I guess I would say, assertive with your partner, or just being more direct with your romantic partner. And so let's really talk about this Saturn in the 7th, because that is really significant for you. Now, with Saturn entering your 7th house, Saturn is one of the most important planets in astrology. It is also considered a malefic planet, meaning that it can be quite a challenging planet. So Saturn is this planet that wants to create order. It's this planet that wants to create structure to whatever house it enters. So the fact that it's entering your 7th house is really significant for you, because it brings up this theme of strengthening your relationships, strengthening your bond with other people. It really brings this energy of structuring bonds you have in your life. So the fact that it's in Aquarius, it's like you want to strengthen your bond with your community. You want to strengthen your bond with people around you. Now, the 7th house is this house of one-on-one partnerships, but Aquarius represents community and social dynamics. So I see you really strengthening your social dynamics. I see you being a leader within social dynamics. Overall, that's the huge theme I think you have for April, is just the sense of leadership. And I feel like this Saturn really emphasizes that for you. And Saturn represents mature people or older people in astrology. So you can kind of expect to attract maybe older people that will help you, older people to guide you. Either way, there's a lot of interaction happening socially that will really benefit you and help you develop into this leader that you are. So something you might experience in April is just unifying with others based on common goals, based on common interests. With Saturn being in the sign of Aquarius, Aquarius is the sign of social justice. It's the sign of social dynamics and community, like I mentioned. So I see you really uniting with people based on social justice topics. I see you really being involved maybe in your community, maybe in charity work. Either way, I see you helping other people and being quite the leader. And although you do have, you are manifesting your own vision, I see you helping others along the way too, and receiving help from other people, especially older people. So I will say the shadow side of Saturn is that it is quite restrictive. So what can happen is that you might have restrictions within your relationships, or maybe even like a literal breakup in relationships or ending of relationships, but it's definitely not I don't see a sad energy around it. So if you lose any friends or break up with someone in April, it's not a terribly sad thing. It's almost a good thing, because you're attracting a whole new set of people that are so much more beneficial to you in your life, in your career, and with manifesting your vision you have. Despite the challenges that Saturn brings to your 7th house and Mars brings to your 7th house, there is a really big blessing coming to you in April. And if you want to find out what that is, stay tuned for part 2 of this video. And in the meantime, you guys can follow me on Instagram at AstroKit, and I will see you Leos in my next video. Okay, so let's talk about the month of April for Cancer. Okay, Cancers, so the month of April is a really huge month for you overall, and we're going to talk about the astrological events that are happening and how it's going to influence you. Cancer, when I was doing your reading and your prediction for the month of April, the quote that really surfaced and really represents your month of April is this energy of you innovating your life and doing things different. And so during April, you're really focused on your career. You're really focused on your reputation and how you're perceived by the public. And this is due to the fact that you'll have the sun in your 10th house. Now you're going to have the sun in your 10th house for the beginning half of April, and then towards the end it goes to your 11th house, and we're going to talk about what that will manifest as. And so for the bulk of April, you're really focused on your career, and not just your career, but advancing in your career. Restructuring your career, improving your career. This could be a time where you're starting a new career or choosing a new career direction. And I feel like this is a little bit similar to Leo, where although we're sort of in this chaotic space society-wise, and there's like a lot of panic and things like that, I feel like you're really seeing the opportunity within all of this. You're not having this, pity party about whatever. I feel like you are really taking advantage of it and advancing your career because of it. And so this word of innovation comes to mind. I really feel like you're learning how to do things differently. You're learning how to gain success in your life, but maybe it's not in the most practical way, or maybe it's not in the most traditional way, but you're really becoming skilled at gaining success in a way that is unique to you. And with the sun sitting at the top of your chart all throughout April, it's like you're really seeing the bigger picture. You're seeing what you want to do with your life. You're seeing your legacy, your greater vision. You have this very clear vision of your life and what you want out of it. And you are manifesting how to get there. You are manifesting how to actualize this vision and make it a reality. And so all throughout April, I really feel like you're seeing the bigger picture. You're seeing the higher perspective of things. You're seeing things outside of the box. As I mentioned with the quote that describes your month, it's all about this theme of innovation. I feel like not only are you innovating your life, innovating your career, I feel like you're innovating or you're really gaining this innovative spirit. You're having this innovative perspective. You're looking at circumstances and situations and you're assessing like, okay, how can this benefit me? How can this work to my advantage? How can I make this work into my greater plan? You're seeing things in that kind of high perspective. You're not just seeing it as what it is. I feel like you're seeing it for what it truly is and what it really can be for you. Also during April, I really see you guys creating a plan too, creating a life plan. This is the energy of you being very logical and grounded. And like I said, although there's chaos, although there's panic, and society is a little shaky right now, I feel like you are that solid foundation. I feel like you are putting that energy into building a solid foundation that makes sense, that is logical, something you could follow through on. And although there is chaos, I feel like you are grounded within that chaos. And because you are grounded, it rewards you later on in life and really in April specifically. And so speaking of being grounded and practical, you also have Mercury in the 10th house for April. And this is also really great energy for you because, again, it just allows you to have this very expanded perspective. It allows you to communicate, speak, and just think in a way that is thinking of the future, thinking of your future goals, and being very practical and grounded to achieve those things and not deviate too far from that. And I will say with Mercury in the 10th in April, it just gives you a really great dose of common sense and just this ability to think very logically and very clearly and not be too confused and self-loathing. So when the sun moves into your 11th house in April, I really feel like this is a moment where, again, you are continuing this very innovative spirit. The 11th house is also about social circles, social dynamics. So something I predict for Cancers and something I see happening for you guys is maybe a rise in social status. Maybe, you have some sort of goal relating to, your job, career, and it involves, ranking higher in social status, or it involves, being a leader of some sort. And I see you achieving that goal or achieving that status by the end of. Also, 11th house is the house of hopes, dreams, wishes, and goals. So I do see you achieving your goals in April. Obviously, maybe one or two major goals you have, or as I mentioned, you're creating this very solid, steady plan to achieve your goals. So maybe by the end of April, you achieve maybe one or two things on the step or track of your goal plan list. Also, on just like an everyday level, the 11th house does represent social media, social dynamics, and the internet. So maybe if your career or job has to do with the internet, or it has to do with socializing on the internet, social networks, you can find some success in that, some recognition in that. Let's say you have a cooking blog or something and you need like traffic for that blog. I can see you really gaining that traffic towards the end of April when the sun goes into your 11th house. So anyway, let's talk about the major thing happening for you in April, and that is Mars and Saturn are going to be in your 8th house. And so this is really significant for you, and we're going to talk about how this will influence your life. But first, tell me down below if you're a Cancer, sun, moon, or rising, and when you watch prediction videos, do you relate more to your sun, moon, or rising sign? Okay, so Saturn and Mars in your 8th house. Now this is really big and can present some challenges for you just because Mars and Saturn are both malefic planets in astrology, and the 8th house is kind of a challenging house to deal with. So let's talk about it. So first things first, let's talk about Mars in the 8th. Now, I feel like Mars does pretty well in the 8th house, especially with a transit. Saturn is another story, but let's talk about Mars. So Mars is this planet of ambition, or it represents ambition. It represents the sense of boldness, fearlessness, the sense of going after what you want in a very fearless, unapologetic way. And so with this Mars being in your 8th house, it's so beneficial for you just because it gives you a lot of willpower, a lot of concentration. This is the energy of someone who goes after something and does not quit until they get it. So this Mars being in your 8th house in April and the sun being in your 10th house in April, it's just very unstoppable energy. This is the energy of you just achieving. And even if you're not achieving something right away, it's almost like you're on that path and you're not deviating off of it. You're not getting distracted. You are so focused on your goals and the manifestation of them in April. Like the shadow side of Mars being in your 8th house is that it makes you a little bit too egotistical. I feel like with your sun in the 10th while your Mars is in the 8th, it's kind of egotistical energy, kind of like energy of you doing what you want and not really considering people's opinions, which is a good thing and something that will benefit for you in April, but it can be a little bit of like that egotistical attitude. So I think that's the shadow side of it and the challenge you might deal with. And not only is it kind of egotistical energy, it's also very stubborn energy. Sun in the 10th house is also very stubborn energy, so you have to watch out for being a little bit too stubborn and a little bit too unmovable. You still have to have this sense of adaptation and being willing to open towards others, but being too stubborn might be your downfall if you lend yourself to that energy too much. And so that leads me to Saturn. Now, Saturn is one of the most important planets in astrology and has definitely a huge reputation. Saturn, it's this planet that represents order. Ultimately, that's what Saturn wants to do. It wants to create order in our lives. It wants to create structure. And I feel like now that Saturn is entering your 8th house, I feel like it represents the sense of mastery, the sense of achievement through strategy, through planning, and through realistic action. And I will say that's the productive manifestation of it. Ultimately, with it being in your 8th house, you're going to learn how to really master yourself, master your emotions, really become very skilled at creating strategies to achieve your goals. And I feel like this energy does work in your favor just because you have that 10th house sun that is motivating you towards your goals, and Saturn is going to give you that work ethic, that drive, that concentration to add structure to those goals. So you're really learning how to create structure out of abstract ideas, create structure to your goals, and doing it in a very realistic way, in a methodical way. I feel like in April, you're going to have this realization where obviously you're not going to achieve everything at once, or achieve everything by the end of April, or achieve everything by the end of this year. Saturn teaches you that things take time to manifest. And that's something you're going to learn in April, starting in April and all throughout this year, as Saturn is in your 8th house. So Saturn is also a very challenging planet. And I feel like one of the challenges he can teach you in the 8th house is that you have to be patient. Again, I feel like there's this whole element of timing with achieving goals and things. And I feel like you're going to realize that you have to have patience for certain goals. And Saturn is going to teach you that with its presence in the 8th house. And I feel like the biggest challenge with Saturn being in the 8th house is that it can really represent bringing karmic lessons into your life. Now, the 8th house is a very karmic house. It's also a water house, and Saturn doesn't really like being in the 8th house. It's not the best placement for Saturn. It does benefit you just because it is an Aquarius and you do have Mars in the 8th house. But basically, with Saturn in the 8th house, I feel like the biggest challenge is this theme of karma, this theme of, you know, having certain lessons being repeated over and over again. Or I feel like it can also manifest as, you know, lessons you thought you learned or things you thought you learned in the past are gonna revisit you somehow. And they might be kind of challenging lessons that you tried to forget about. But again, Saturn is this planet of reality and practicality and the bare bones truth. So maybe Saturn is gonna show you some hard lessons you learned, but ultimately it's for you to learn from them and move forward appropriately and not just ignore them or dismiss them without learning them first. And the 8th house is also kind of this unpredictable energy too. And it's also the house of crisis. So you can expect some certain circumstances that are unexpected and bring crisis to you throughout this Saturn in the 8th transit. Ultimately, though, it's going to create order in your life and, you know, help you along with your goals, but you are going to experience challenging circumstances in order to master yourself even more and master the goals that Saturn wants you to initiate. And so despite these challenges, you are going to receive a major blessing in April. And if you want to find out what that is, stay tuned for my next video. And in the meantime, you guys can follow me on Instagram at AstroKit, and I'll see you Cancers in my next video. Okay, so let's talk about the month of April for Gemini. So Gemini, the month of April for you is very significant and very pivotal in your life. And we're really going to talk about what astrological events are happening and how they're going to influence you directly. And so as I was doing your reading for April, a major theme that really surfaced for you is that you're going to be really focused on what you're inspired by. And overall, there's this huge theme of inspiration for you. And we're going to talk about what exactly that means and how that manifests in your life during April. So in April, you're starting off pretty much the first half of the month with the sun sitting in your 11th house, and then it slowly moves into your 12th house by the end of April. 8th house is all about this sense of hopes, dreams, wishes, desires. It is one of the desire houses in astrology. So you're really going to be focused on your desires, your goals at large, and really how to manifest them into reality. You're really focused, like, not just on just petty desires or things that you can achieve pretty easily. You're really focused on the bigger picture here. You're focused on things that satisfies your soul and your soul's journey, not just your ego. And I really feel like you're taking this inspiration that you're receiving while this sun is in your 11th house, and you're letting it carry you. You're letting it drive you. You're letting it help you achieve things that are greater than just everyday life. So whatever your goals are, whatever deep desire you have, it has this potential for fulfillment in April. It has this potential to actualize for you because that's what you're going to be so focused on. And also the 11th house is all about social dynamics. It's about your community, your friend groups, anything having to do with socializing. Even online socializing, like social media and social networks. And so for a lot of Geminis, maybe your soul's desire or things that you are passionate about involves other people. Maybe it involves humanity or helping others. And if it does involve that, then this is a month for you where obviously that can manifest. And I think I mentioned in your new moon prediction video that you are becoming a leader. With the sun in your 11th, it does represent this sense of leadership, leading groups, leading your social circles. As I mentioned in the Aries new moon prediction video, I feel like the new moon is offering you this new start in terms of social dynamics and inviting new people into your life that support your bigger vision, that support your bigger desires. I really feel like there's this energy for you of collaborating with like-minded people, uniting with like-minded people. Anything having to do with other people and your goals and your desires, you're gonna find people who align with that. And I feel like it's gonna fulfill you just so much. And then to add even more flavor to this 11th house, you actually have Mercury sitting in your 11th house all throughout April. So Mercury is your ruling planet, so you obviously know it's all about communication, communicating ideas, thought processes, and exchange of ideas as well. And so with Mercury sitting in your 11th house in April, This is such potent energy for you just because it represents you really thinking outside of the box. This is a moment in April, or there's like a series of moments where there's going to be a lot of opportunities presented to you. And it's not like someone's just handing it to you. It's more like you're just thinking of stuff right away. You're having these visions, you're having these ideas that are kind of random but super valuable as it pertains to that bigger vision and deep desire you have. So with this Mercury being in the 7th house, I really see you having your mind very much open to all the possibilities. There's nothing that is impossible for you in April just because that's your perspective. Your perspective isn't limited. Your perspective isn't in a box. I really feel like you're thinking outside of the box, especially in April, and it's going to contribute to a lot of success for you, a lot of gains and achievement for you. Speaking of gains and achievement, I don't know if I mentioned this, but there's this potential for you to gain more social status or gain recognition. Maybe there's recognition that you feel like you want or deserve, or just like this elevation of social status as it pertains to groups. And then as the sun sort of creeps into your 12th house, you're going to be a little bit more introspective and more inclined towards solitude. In the beginning half of April, you're more social and very, buzzing around, just socializing with a lot of people. But towards the end, you're going to feel more inwardly turned just because 12th house is this very isolation type of energy. But it's not really like a lonely sort of isolation. It's more of a time where you retreat inward and really consult with yourself and see how your goals are manifesting, how things are working out for you, and really just focusing on your own inner vision and your own inspiration from within. Okay, so let's talk about something really exciting happening in your chart in April. But first, tell me down below if you're a Gemini, sun, moon, or rising. And when you watch prediction videos, do you relate more to your sun, moon, or rising? Okay, so a major thing that's going to happen for you in April is that Mars and Saturn are entering your 9th house. So Mars and Saturn are both malefic planets in astrology, and they give very mixed results depending on the houses they enter. Okay, so first let's talk about Mars, and then we'll talk about Saturn. Okay, so with Mars in the 9th house, I will say Mars does pretty well in the 9th house just because it feels very unrestricted. There's this theme of freedom very much present with 9th house energy. And so with Mars being in your 9th, I feel like you're going to be so motivated to achieve your goals. There's this very happy-go-lucky, very optimistic energy with Mars in the 9th, where it's like you almost feel untouchable. You feel like you can do anything, achieve anything. You don't feel constrained at all, or you don't feel like you're in a box. You feel like you can accomplish whatever vision you actually have. So it really brings up this major theme of optimism for you and achieving things with a very optimistic attitude. Also, Mars in the 9th is very spontaneous energy. It's very adventurous energy. So I can see you in April doing many spontaneous things, adventurous things, just things you wouldn't normally do. And then also your 11th house is activated too. So this might involve groups. Maybe you travel somewhere with a group, or you just do something out of the norm, and it might involve your social group that you're a part of. And to add another level to that, you can do something where you're the leader within that. So there can be a situation where you lead a group to do something, or it doesn't have to be super formal. It could just be you being a leader on a daily basis and doing things that, contribute to the sense of fun, optimism, boldness, adventure with other people. And so with that being said, I feel like the shadow side and challenge with Mars in the 9th is being a little bit too uncontrolled. It makes you very spontaneous, but obviously you have to not, push that boundary of being too spontaneous and too impulsive and doing things without thinking too much first. And so that brings me to Saturn. Now Saturn is entering your 9th house. It's entering the sign of Aquarius, and Saturn does pretty okay in the 9th house. But really, Saturn's ultimate goal is to create order, is to create structure. So whatever house it enters, it wants to create order and structure to the themes of that house. And so 9th house is this sense of optimism, this sense of expansion, and really this sense of fulfilling your visions and fulfilling your dreams. And so Saturn here, I feel like it might give a little bit of mixed results just because Saturn wants to restrict things. It wants to put order to things. And 9th house does not want order. It doesn't want strictness. 9th house does want order, but more so in a philosophical sense, in an abstract sense. And Saturn really wants more so concrete, very tangible order and structure. So I feel like the conflict you might run into in April is just feeling like you want to bring things to fruition, but Saturn is going to kind of delay that a bit. Now, this won't all happen in April. Saturn works very slowly, so you're just going to feel instances in your life and experiences where you kind of get put in check by this Saturn like energy, and Saturn puts you in check because he delays things. He, you know, makes things happen at a certain time period and not necessarily at the time period you want it to be. And so of course that energy can be quite frustrating. So I do sense for you, Gemini, feeling a little bit of that frustrating energy where you want to do things and be impulsive and spontaneous, but Saturn is just like, well, is that the smartest thing to do? Is that the most productive thing to do? Saturn is really bringing this logic and kind of harsh reality to the kind of whimsical, you know, ninth house. And I feel like the ultimate lesson and challenge you're going to learn with Saturn being in your ninth house is learning how to put order and structure to your goals in a very methodical way, not doing things too impulsively or too recklessly, but really doing it in a way that is about you taking initiative, being bold, but at the same time being very strategic and patient. And so despite the challenges that Saturn does bring in the ninth house, there is a major blessing coming your way in April. And if you want to find out what that is, stay tuned for my next video. And in the meantime, you guys can follow me on Instagram at AstroKit, and I will see you Geminis in my next video. Okay, so let's talk about the month of April for Taurus. Okay, Taurus, so the month of April is a pretty big month for you. And we're really going to talk about the major astrological events happening and how they will influence you directly. And so Taurus, as I was doing your reading, the quote that could really summarize the month for you would be that it's a month where you are aligning with your true divinity. And really this whole theme of divinity is very much emphasized for you. And I feel like that really stems from the fact that you will have your sun in the 12th house for the first half of April, and then in the second half, it goes into your first house. And so with Sun in the 12th house energy, you feel a lot more spiritually inclined. You feel more inclined to look inward, to retreat, to isolate yourself. The 12th house is this house that represents isolation. So during April, you could be isolating yourself a bit, but I feel like it's not just isolating yourself to do it. I feel like it's a very productive isolation period. It's a very reflective isolation period where you really get in touch with your inner self, your inner soul, and your inner divinity. Inner spirituality that you're connecting with, I feel like in April, it's going to really empower you. Usually with 12th house transits, they can be quite draining and exhausting, which is something you might feel during April, but I feel like you'll feel very empowered spiritually. Even if you are a little bit physically tired throughout April, I feel like you're going to feel very spiritually empowered and very emotionally empowered as well. And having this very grounded, prideful sense of your own spiritual beliefs and your own spiritual perspective. So in April, you can expect to be a lot more inwardly turned. I can see you meditating a lot more. Maybe you're doing yoga, you're retreating inward, you're just doing maybe a lot of at-home activities, and just being very much to yourself, but at the same time being very reflective within yourself as well. And I feel like the positive thing with Sun in the 12th house transits is that I feel like it's a time where you really get to know yourself and really know your direction in life. And although it's not really the house of action, this isn't a transit of action for you. It's more of a transit where you reflect, and then as the sun moves into your first house, that's when your thoughts and your dreams, your visions, etc. become action for you. And so we're going to talk about the sun going into your 12th house. One thing I will say about the whole aspect of visions and beliefs and inner reflection is that Mercury is also going to be in your 12th house during April. So Mercury is the planet of communication. It's this planet of exchange of ideas, this planet of mental processes. So having it in your 12th house is very powerful just because it represents you being a lot more intuitive, receiving like revelations, receiving divine messages, receiving this knowledge that seems to come out of nowhere. And I feel like you're going to receive a lot of revelations or messages about your inner divine nature, and that divine nature is really empowering who you truly are. So as the sun makes its way to your first house towards the end of April, which is Taurus season, you're going to start feeling more active again, more action oriented, From 12th house to 1st house, it's always like a huge shift. You're definitely going to feel that around, I think, like the 20th. And you're going to feel lethargic maybe in the beginning half of April, like I said, a lot more isolated. But as soon as that sun enters your 1st house, you're going to be a lot more willing to be outwardly turned, more extroverted, and more action oriented overall. And also too, I will say, with that energy of the sun going into the 1st house towards the end of April, this is a moment where you really take those things or concepts you were really reflecting on, things you weren't really acting on, right? You're putting them into action towards the end of April. So you can expect to maybe be very imaginative, very dreamlike, and very indulgent in your own sort of fantasies in the beginning half of April, but towards the end, you're going to start putting those into action. So maybe it has to do with, your creative vision, maybe creative projects you have, or anything having to do with career. I see you putting that more into action towards the end of April rather than the beginning. Okay, so let's talk about something really major happening in your chart in April. And so the major event that's happening for you in your chart is that you're going to have Mars and Saturn in your 10th house. So this energy is really significant just because Mars and Saturn are both malefics in astrology, but they do represent something really significant in your life in April. And so let's get into what that is. But before we do, tell me down below if you're a Taurus, sun, moon, or rising. And when you watch prediction videos, do you relate more to your sun, moon, or rising sign? So anyway, let's talk about this Mars and Saturn. So we'll first talk about Mars and then we'll talk about Saturn. So with this Mars in the 10th house, it's actually very productive energy. Mars does pretty well in the 10th house. It's a planet that represents assertiveness, this planet that represents ambition and this sense of drive and willpower. And the 10th house is all about goals, career, recognition, and achievement. So as you can imagine, that's what the 10th house wants to do. It wants to advance its goals. So having Mars here is so impactful for you because it's giving you that motivation, that drive to achieve your larger goals, your greater vision, especially as it pertains to your career. This Mars really starts functioning well and gets really activated once your sun goes into the 1st house. So you can expect a lot more action towards the end of April. But like I said in the beginning, it's more about reflection and being inwardly turned. So for you, Taurus, I do see a lot of success in career for you because you're being so ambitious. You're so goal oriented. And Mars in the 10th house, honestly, it's this energy of you not stopping until you achieve something. And I know for you as a Taurus, you're definitely somebody who achieves a lot of their goals at their own pace. And this Mars energy is really amplifying that for you and making you a lot more ambitious and giving you willpower to do whatever you set out to do. I will say the shadow side of that Mars in the 10th house energy is that it does make you a bit more impulsive and a little bit impatient. Now that does conflict a bit with that sun in the 12th house energy. And so I sense in April for you, you feel a little bit of that tension of like wanting to do things and really put yourself out there and achieve things. But there's still like that sense of like, okay, I need to reflect, I need to plan, I need to strategize. Speaking of strategize, that's another key word with the Mars in the 10th house transit, is that you're going to be more inclined to set a strategy in place. The 10th house is this very concrete house. It's this house that represents tangible results. So you're really not only dreaming about things, you're not only thinking about them in an imaginative way, but you're also creating a strategic plan, a logical plan to achieve them, and then you're very motivated to actualize that plan. And so let's talk about Saturn really quickly. So Saturn is really one of the most important planets in astrology, and having it in your 10th house is very powerful for you because Saturn naturally rules Capricorn, and Capricorn is represented by the 10th house. So Saturn is very comfortable and actually does very well in the 10th house. So with this transit, you can really expect for Saturn to more so work in your favor rather than be as malefic as it usually can be. But the key thing that Saturn really wants to do is create order. Saturn wants to create structure. So having Saturn enter your 10th house is beneficial because it helps you to create that structure, that order to your career, to your legacy, to your goals. Again, there's this whole theme I see you developing where you're developing this strategy, this plan, this very logical layout, this logical foundation. And Saturn is really going to help you go through that plan step by step and achieve your goals in an intelligent and methodical way. And I will say the shadow side of Saturn is that it can be a little bit restrictive. So sometimes with Saturn, it delays things and it makes things not happen at the exact pace you want. So like I said, Mars in the 10th is kind of impulsive energy. So you might be feeling a bit impulsive at certain times during April and wanting to do things and have things be achieved. But Saturn is like, okay, we're not on your time, we're on my time. So Saturn is going to put you in check and maybe delay some things. And while it's in your 10th house, you might not achieve everything you want at the time you want, but it's going to be achieved eventually. And I feel like that's the key lesson you're going to learn while Saturn is in your 10th house, is this sense of delayed gratification. And so despite the challenges you might experience with Saturn and Mars, there is a really big blessing for you coming in April. And so if you want to find out what that is, stay tuned for my next video. And in the meantime, you guys can follow me on Instagram at AstroKit, and I'll see you Taurus in my next video. Okay, so let's talk about the month of April for Aries. Okay, so for you Aries, the month of April is a very important month for you. It is Aries season after all, and we're going to talk about what astrological events are happening and how that's going to influence you directly. Okay, so as I was doing your prediction, something that kept popping up for you is this theme of boldness, this theme of action, which of course is the epitome of Aries energy. And so the quote I would use to describe the month of April for you is that fortune favors the bold. So of course there's this energy of boldness, this energy of fearlessness, because the sun is going to be in your first house. And so for the bulk of April, the sun will be in your first house, and then towards around the 20th, the sun goes into your second house. So you're really going to feel that first house sun energy for the majority of April. So this first house sun energy is so beneficial because it brings to you this sense of self-awareness, this boost in confidence. This is the energy of you wanting to be seen, energy of you wanting to pursue your goals. During April, I sense for you that you're going to be really focused on projecting yourself outward, focused on creative self-expression. The sun ultimately wants to express itself. It wants to shine its light onto things. And the first house is the house of self. It's the house of identity. So I really feel like you're going to be expressing your identity, expressing yourself in very creative ways throughout April, and that's going to be a sense of vitality for you. And it's going to be very refreshing in your life to embody that solar energy. I really feel like this is a time where you're focused on initiating your own projects. You're really invested in yourself in April, and it's not really like in a selfish way. I don't think it's in a counterproductive way. I feel like it's a very productive thing for you to be more selfish in April and more self-focused. And this is going to help push your goals forward, push your life forward, and ultimately improve the quality of your life because you're focused on improving yourself. So to add like an extra boost of flavor to the first house during April, you actually have Mercury in the first house all throughout April. And so to have this energy in your first house, again, it really just supports this energy of self-expression. This is a month for you where I see you just expressing yourself in many different ways. So you can do it through writing, speaking, and just having conversations with other people. I feel like the conversations you have with other people right now, or in April really, it's going to be very inspiring for you, really spark a lot of ideas for you. And really the sun is almost like a magnet. So when it's in the first house, people are just going to be so magnetized toward you. I feel like for Aries in April, people are just going to want to be around you, want to talk to you, want to exchange ideas with you. And I feel like you're going to reciprocate that energy with them. So in the last half of April, when the sun goes into your second house, you kind of tone down a bit and you're less like center stage, I would say, and you're more focused also on your material gain. Because after all, the second house does represent wealth, it represents resources, it represents anything having to do with physical resources. Anything physical, really, the second house does rule. So you're going to be more serious, I would say, towards the end of April. And of course, it's your birthday and you do what you want in the first half of April, but the second half, you kind of bring it down a bit. And so with the sun being in your second house, you're going to be more focused on how to improve your finances, how to improve your financial strategy. You're going to be focused more on sort of like your foundations and your goals and how to build foundations for your goals. Okay, so let's talk about a major event that is influencing you in April. In April, Mars and Saturn are both going to be in your 11th house. So Mars and Saturn are two of the most important planets in astrology, and they're actually both malefic planets, meaning they are very challenging and give very mixed results depending where they are. And so we're going to talk about both of these planets and their influence on you. First, let's talk about Mars though. So Mars in the 11th house is very productive energy for you. The 11th house is all about this sense of gaining your desires, manifesting your desires. It's about having this sense of hope and wishes and fulfilling those hopes and wishes. And so Mars is this very ambitious energy, this very courageous, fearless, bold energy. So I feel like this will manifest for you as you being more ambitious towards your goals, ambitious towards fulfilling those desires that you do have. And I feel like specifically for Aries, how this will manifest is that it does bring you a lot of opportunity. 11th house is a very opportunity-based house, and Mars is this planet of action. So I feel like as long as you're taking action and putting yourself at the right place at the right time, especially like physically, like literally, you will receive those opportunities, but you'll only receive them if you take proper action to make them manifest into your life. And also to add like another layer to that, 11th house is the house of social dynamics, social communities, whether that be online or in real life. It's the house of groups ultimately. So this can be a time where you're more motivated, Mars, to really collaborate with other people and collaborate with others on a common goal, on a common idea. I can see for Aries in April, you collaborate with other people that help you manifest your goals much quicker, help you receive opportunities much more quickly because you put yourself in the position to network with those people. Networking is definitely a major theme of Mars in the 11th house transit, so you can expect to be more willing to network during April and just be more collaborative with others, especially as it pertains to fulfilling your own goals, desires, and wishes. And also, I feel like the theme of leadership presents itself with Mars in the 11th house and you becoming a leader among social groups you are a part of. I do think the shadow side of Mars in the 11th house is being a little bit too egotistical or getting in arguments with your friends or social groups you're a part of because you are over asserting your ego too much. So I could sense in April you might run into like some ego battles a little bit, especially in social dynamics. Now it won't like hinder you too much, but just be wary of that Mars energy that is very aggressive, very egotistical, being in the 11th house of social groups. Okay, so let's talk about Saturn really quickly. Okay, Saturn is this planet that is malefic. However, I feel like it does do somewhat well in the 11th house, and also it is entering the sign of Aquarius, which is your 11th house, and it does pretty well in the sign of Aquarius. But ultimately, what does Saturn want to do? Saturn wants to create order. It wants to create structure. So whenever it enters a new house, it wants to create structure and order to whatever themes that house represents. So of course, as mentioned, the 11th house is all about desires, goals, wishes, and fulfilling those things, gaining the opportunities to fulfill those things. So I feel like Saturn entering your 11th house does end up being very, very productive for you just because it allows you to add structure to your goals, add structure to the plan that you have to achieve your goals and fulfill those wishes you have. And I feel like this is just so impactful because whenever anyone has a desire, it's just an idea, it's just a feeling. And a lot of times if you don't have the discipline to manifest whatever that desire is, it won't happen for you. And what does Saturn do? It gives you that discipline to do that and really fulfill that desire in a practical, logical way. So Saturn is really inspiring this sense of discipline within you, inspiring this sense of work ethic and the kind of patience you need to achieve certain desires. The theme of patience is obviously a major thing I feel like Aries deal with just because you can struggle with being impatient or struggle with waiting for things to manifest, but Saturn is really going to teach you patience. And sometimes that might manifest, that's the one challenge with Saturn, is that it might manifest as delays or things not happening when you want them to. but you just have to trust the bigger vision and trust that order will be created and your goals will manifest despite them not manifesting at the exact time you want. And so for you, Aries, I definitely see you being kind of impulsive and egotistical on one hand, just because you have that Sun on the 1st, Mars in the 11th, but then Saturn kind of puts that in check and kind of checks you in a way that allows you to be more patient and more understanding of the bigger picture at large and how to be patient to achieve your goals. And so there are challenges that Saturn and Mars represent, but despite that, you are receiving a really huge blessing in April. And if you want to find out what that is, stay tuned for my next video. And in the meantime, you guys can follow me on Instagram at AstroKit, and I will see you, Aries, in my next video.